Hello, welcome to the February 22nd, 2022 Club Cubase live stream. I'm going to do a quick audio test, make sure everything's coming through. Then we'll get started. Hello, welcome to the February 22nd. All right, so my monitoring computer sounds fine. My name is Greg Undo. I'll be the host for the live stream today. I work as a product specialist, primarily focusing on Steinberg products for Yamaha Corporation of America, and I'm based in the United States, just outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. If you're watching this live stream live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. It's always interesting seeing people from all over the world being a part of the community. How a live stream works, if you have not attended one before, is you could ask questions in the live chat field, or you could submit questions in advance if you want to email them to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, if you could specify which version of Cubase you're running, whether it's LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, as well as which version, so it's 10, 10.5, 11, and also which operating system, that information is helpful. And my ability to answer questions in real time with the chat will soon go away. I'm probably past that already, but I will try my best to catch up. And realize that if you ask a question and don't get an immediate response, that I will go through all of the discussion in chronological order. So if we could try to refrain from asking the same question repeatedly, that would be appreciated. Otherwise, it just kind of slows down the whole process. We should, several hours after the live stream today, we should have an index of all the topics that have been discussed in the chat, and at that point we will have timestamps so you could easily navigate to particular sections of the chat. So so look for that a few hours after. And if you wanted to search for topics that may have been covered during previous live streams, then you could go to cubaseindex.com, and Jan from Stockholm has been kind enough to create the Cubase Index site, so we want to give special thanks to Jan. We have two people that serve as moderators, so we want to give special thanks to Agent K and to Jazz Dude for their help. They're not Steinberg employees; they just kind of do it to help the community. So we want to give special thanks to them. Also, another wonderful resource of information besides the actual official Steinberg channels is going to be the Cubase Nation Discord, and I know that Jazz Dude does a lot of work maintaining that and collecting different tutorials that are relevant to the Steinberg community. So special kudos to Jazz Dude for his efforts in maintaining that. So with that, we will go ahead and get started. So one quick note before we get started is Friday is the last live stream of the month. It seemed to come very quickly. Usually the last live stream of the month, what we do is a 2-hour Club Cubase and then a 2-hour Zoom. So if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I will get a Zoom invite sent to you, or I will just include it on the next live stream as well in the chat as we get started. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so we see Rudy checking in from South Africa and Sable Winters from Bay Area in Northern California. All right, we see Rick Ballantyne. So I enjoyed listening to your piece on Facebook this morning. Great piece. Glad you got the colors all sorted out so it could hopefully look as good as it sounds. So congratulations on that piece. Rick's a wonderful composer. You could check him out. All right, so we see Robbie Bowling from Dallas, and we see Jan from Stockholm, the creator of Cubase Index. All right, so we just see a question. The Twitter leak about Cubase 12 to be released mid to end March. Any truth in that? So I can't really comment on much on Cubase 12 other than what's been publicly announced. But and that is that it will be Apple M1 native as well as have the new licensing system. But other than that, I can't really comment on future stuff. But I would say that if you're looking to take advantage of grace period updates, that I would hurry and do that. So okay, so we see Michael Pierce on the live stream. Great to see you. We have Patrick checking in from Kingston in Canada. We have Uno Memento from Finland. Okay, so we have Trans 2020 from Berkshire in the UK. All right, so we have Patrick Woods checking in from Ireland with Cubase 11 Elements. You see the Cube. We have Stefan from Sweden. We have Luthier 47 from Atlantic City, New Jersey. Thanks for joining. We have Tony also checking in from Finland. And we have John checking in from New York in the UK. All right, and we have Jason Sykes from South Shields, England. Okay, so we have Michael Pierce has a question. Hi, Greg. Is there a way of saving I/O info in a project when moving between computers? Took a project home over the weekend on my little 2-channel system. I went back to work and all 64 channels are disconnected. So what a lot of people will do, because sometimes the project may reference I/O that it's been saved with. But if you wanted to come, I think, Michael Pierce, if you wanted to come over here, and if you have these kind of saved as like your inputs and outputs saved as presets for the project, that you should be able to kind of move that back. But otherwise, if you save it with different input and output configurations, that will be saved. But I think you could quickly navigate it back if when you go to the audio connections, if you have your inputs and outputs saved as presets. So you give that a try. All right, so we have a question. How would I use the logical editor to clean up a MIDI performance in terms of note length and velocity? Can you randomize the notes, then clean up randomized notes as well? All right, so let's say if we have just some MIDI information here, we'll go full screen so everyone can see it a little easier. Okay, so let's say if I just wanted to clean up, and let's say if we have notes that are maybe like if we're looking at our velocity and we have particular notes that might have been kind of accidental, where we see, like a really, maybe our finger just kind of dragged on a particular note. So if we wanted to kind of clean up based upon velocity, what we could do is just come to our logical editor, and we could choose to, okay, I want it to just come right here, and we'll say, let's delete type events are equal to note, and we could say that have a value 2, which is the velocity in a MIDI note message. And we could say, lower or less than, 50. So at this point, I could just come here, and then we could just delete particular notes that have velocities lower than 50. We could also choose to, delete notes that have a velocity less than 50. And if we come over here and add a new condition, we could say that their length is less than, let's say, a 16th note. So at this point, I could come here and I could delete notes that fit both of those conditions when I include the and here, or or either of those conditions. So I could just come here and say, delete notes that have a velocity lower than 50 or that have a length less than a 16th note. So we could just come over here and do stuff like that to kind of clean up performances. Okay, and if we wanted to kind of randomize notes, we could do that as well. So, we could, if you wanted to do a different function, we could just say, let's say I wanted to randomize the pitch of all of these particular notes. So in that case, I would choose function. Let's transform. We'll take MIDI notes, and I wanted to randomize, let's say, the pitch. And we could just say, okay, so I'll just say we're going to take our notes and we'll go in our action target and we'll say value 1, which is pitch. We want to set to random values between C1 and let's say 36 through 64. So I could, or I could do it within a particular key. So then I could just randomize the pitches just like that. And if we wanted to set to random values between particular notes or set to random values or transpose to scale, we could also do stuff like that. So let me know if that helps. Okay, so we just see question. How can I create a score that has two separate lead lines on the same treble clef? All right, so let's come over here. Let's see what pitch I have. Okay, so I'll just put this into a quick step input mode. Let me set my transpose my controller. Okay, so let's say if we wanted to do that, and if I now want to do maybe a different voice, I could again come back here. And if you wanted to, flip the stems of, particular notes, you could, just come right over here and, flip the stems like so. So if you want to select particular notes, excuse me, I had to sneeze. But that's how you could have, if you just wanted to have, two different voices within one stave. Now, if you wanted to have two different parts within the same part, like where we saw, maybe a note here, as well as if we have these two different parts, excuse me, I sneeze. So sorry. So if you had like parts that were on different events here, and you wanted to see both of those on the same staff, you would have to literally copy the notes into one particular part. Okay, sorry, it's my sneezing too much today. All right. All right, so we see Mike checking in from Texas. We have Soren from Sweden. All right, so we have a question. Is there a way to automatically check the loudness of a track and normalize it using two-factor RMS of -18 and a peak of -6? Whatever came first. So if you wanted to normalize a particular audio file, let me just. So, if we have an audio file here, you can go to audio and then look at the statistics, and this will give you an idea of how, where your levels are on that particular audio file to start with. So that's how you could check. And if you needed to change the settings of this, so here we're at -14.8 LUFS. And we see kind of our RMS and, levels directly here and our peak levels. But if we needed to kind of manipulate that and change it, if you go to audio to processes and then choose normalize, we could come right over here and then we could choose to normalize via peak level or via loudness units. But it's not necessarily doing, setting particular values for peak or for RMS. So let me know if that helps. All right, so we have Rick France checking in from Oregon. Thanks for joining us today. All right, so we have a question. When sending drum tracks to parallel comp bus, is there a way to copy paste the source track meters to the send meters so that I can keep the balance the same without having to manually set the meters? Okay, so let's say I think I understand the question, so I'll jump over here to this particular project. Okay, so let's say I want to do parallel processing on my drums here. So I'm going to take all of my drums and I'm going to now come over here and just add, I'm going to add 2 group channels. Okay, so, and what we want to do is if we come over here, we could just put it into Q-Link and let's put it into absolute mode. So I'm going to select all of my drum tracks here. And what I want to do is as we send it to group 1, I can now at this point, as I adjust one of the values, if I wanted to send, they'll all be to the same exact value. So I could just say, let's set this to 0.06. So now when I send it to group 2 and I want to send it to the same values, all I have to do is do this, and now all of the different tracks will automatically be sent. And if we wanted to actually, since they're all kind of in quick link mode, I think we could even go over here to our sends. And if I just wanted to type in like 3 for the top one, and for the bottom one, and let's say I do 3 here. So I just entered the value of 3 in the sends. Since it's in absolute and Q-link mode, I can now just come right over here if I don't enter in the wrong, type in the wrong value. So let's say 3 and 3. So there'll be identical values going out. So once you have it set to Q-link, instead of having it be in suspend all channels, but you can put it into absolute, and this way the values will be the same, and then just type in 1. So if I want these to be at 0, I could just come right here, and with those 2 values, I hit 0 again, and then we have the same exact level being sent out to both parallel groups. So let me know if that's what you're looking to accomplish. So I don't think you have to copy and paste sends across. All right, and we have Tata checking in from Finland, and Kudzi checking in from South Africa. Thanks for joining us today. We have Luca, who I believe is in Munich, who's able to join us on the last Zoom meetup. All right, so we see a question. Hey, Greg, in Media Bay ticking, the checkboxes for user content like sample folders in the right zone, Media Bay list content so slow, untick it, and it's instant. So what is the purpose of the tick option? Thanks. All right, so let's say if we come over here to our Media Bay. So let's say if we go to our user content, all right, so let's say if I just wanted to uncheck, so depending upon the files, all right, so let's say if we just come over here for audio files, so if I uncheck, we can keep, and the reason, it could depend upon like how much content is in that particular folder. So, and there are different preferences for Media Bay. So one thing to check, sometimes people will only have Media Bay check media and scan media when it's open, but you could also kind of have it done in the background. So check your preferences here in Media Bay and see if scan folders only when Media Bay is open. And, if you have that checked, maybe uncheck that, because otherwise Media Bay will only start searching when Media Bay is open instead of just kind of having it do its indexing in the background for you. Okay, so we just see a question. How can I produce a song with flow, maybe quantize? How? So if you get, obviously we can quantize, audio and MIDI information, but I'm not sure what you mean by flow. So maybe, and this from Samuel Saria. So maybe if you're able to kind of rephrase your question, that would be, I could maybe understand it better. Sorry if I'm being a little dense. All right. So see Perry checking in from Memphis. So if I use Catalina now, I have to buy a new iMac because to use Big Sur with Cubase 12. Strange. Why would you do that to long-time customers? So I'm not sure if the system updates have been posted yet. But sometimes, especially when we see this on the Mac OS, that to support more contemporary machines, that some of the older operating systems become incompatible. And, if you're kind of, as we're doing quality assurance test, figure that we have, for every Mac OS version, there's 7 or 8 revisions of operating systems. So if you're like, 4 or 5 operating systems, they would have to do quality assurance testing on, 28 to 35 different operating systems. So that could be problematic after a while, but, maybe you should check with Apple and see, if there's some way to get your iMac updated, and maybe you could raise the same question with Apple as well. Okay, we have a question from Ed Rugman. Is there a way to use the Project Logical editor or macro to filter a selection search for all audio clips that have extensions .ara enabled/active? I'm not sure if there's a particular. We'll see if we could take a look. I don't think that there's a particular function for that, but we'll just take a look in the Project Logical editor. So sometimes we go to property. I don't think that there's a way to select it via kind of an ARA extension. One trick that you may want to do is, let's say if we're here and I have an ARA extension, so I'll come here to my audio menu, let's go to extensions, and we'll launch spectral layers. That I think you might get a sense if we go to our pool window. So let's take a look here. And let me just do a quick edit. Let's see, now if we do an edit, sometimes it may show up in the edits folder for like ARA. So let's see if it. So, but I think if we do that within the project folder itself, that you may be able to determine that. But I don't know of a way using kind of the Project Logical editor or macro to automatically pick different files that have ARA extensions on them. But I'll pass that along as a suggestion. All right, so we have Spike Williams checking in from Wales. Thanks for joining us. And we have Michael Teams. So it says in Weatherford, Texas, it was 81 degrees yesterday and 29 degrees today. So it seems like a lot of places in the world are having bizarre weather like that. So okay, so we have just a question. Sometimes by mistake, mono plugins on the stereo track, is there a quick way to make sure that the inserted plugins are in the proper mono/stereo in a big session? Usually if you use VST3 plugins, they're automatically fit whatever track configuration that you're in. And some of the plugins, I don't think I have any third-party plugins, and all of mine are VST3s. I don't have like a mono version, or I'll just test. Let me just see. I may have an old Yamaha plugin on my system that might have mono or stereo versions. So I'll come over here to inserts. Okay, so say I have the morphing channel strip and I want to put that in stereo. Okay, so this is a mono or stereo plugin. And it's now I loaded the stereo on a particular track. And let's see if there's any indications maybe when we go to the channel strip, if it's doing the routing. So here, I think maybe for other DAWs, but it might work a little differently. But whatever, with VST3 plugins, I don't have a VST2 to really test, but generally it will automatically conform to the channel width of the particular track. But I know, from 15 years ago when I was running Waves plugins, everything would be a mono and a stereo. But if you could let me know which particular plugin that you're working with, that might help. All right, so we have Alexander checking in from Moscow. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we had a question. Anyone already asked when Cubase 12 will be out? So as I mentioned before, just a hint, if you're wanting to do a grace period update, it's a great time to hurry up with that process. Okay, so we have a question from Paul Claridge. Greg, can you show how to trigger patterns in Groove Agent 5 with MIDI notes drawn in and the setup for this to work properly? Okay, so let's come back to different project here, and I'll activate this project. So let's say I have a Groove Agent pattern here. So, or a Groove Agent instrument. So let's say I have this pattern, and we can look at the pattern keys here. So let's say C0. And if I want to do a fill for A0, so we can see the MIDI notes here on the upper right hand portion of the pad to see what is actually being triggered directly from there. So as I wanted to draw in different pattern pads, I'll just solo this track here. Let's go to, and I'll just do like from a MIDI editor. We could do it in a drum editor as well. So I want to start and just draw in a note of C0. So say starting right here, and I want that for 2 measures, and then I want it to go to A0 for a drum fill. Again, let's go to a variation for a couple bars. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and quantize those events. So let's say now, and when we do this, you may want, so we'll have our events laid out for us here. And when I'm in Groove Agent, Groove Agent can have its own sequencer that's kind of built in. So if I wanted to now come over here, we want to make sure that we don't have follow transport on, or that we have play. So when I play now, we'll just kind of start at this particular pattern, C0. And then we should do a drum fill. And if I take it off loop, so now it's going to do but if you have follow transport, you may have 2 different patterns playing back simultaneously. So at this point, make sure that the internal sequencing engine isn't playing in addition to just triggering it, but you can see the patterns names, the MIDI note that triggers this particular pattern just listed in the upper right hand corner, and draw that in, and you should be all set. Okay, so we have a question. I think it's from Alexander. Should I start the project with add sample rate and bit rate and just start to create music? If yes, what is the best for music? 44.1, 24-bit, and I know that 48K is for film scoring. So I know many, there's a lot of people worry about sample rates. my running joke is that if your music doesn't sound good, it's not the sample rate's fault. I know many film composers that still work at 44.1, and they'll just record out to a 48K capture device. That's not terribly uncommon. Some people, love to work at 96K. Some are doing 192K. But it does, don't let the sample rate get in the way of just being able to record something and capture the creativity. So whatever sample rate you record at, you can convert it very easily afterwards. But there's no real reason. Some people gravitate to 48K thinking that it's always going to end up in a video, but a lot of times it just doesn't. So some people work at 44.1 just because, they're thinking of CD mentality, and there's a zillion 44.1 audio files around. So there's no real wrong answer, but, whatever you start with, just kind of stick with it. And if you work with other people, always be aware of the different sample rates that could come in. Okay, so we see question. What exactly does normalizing do to a track? Okay, so let's say I'll just take a particular file and we'll drop in just like a quick vocal so we can see this a little easier. So what normalizing can allow you to do is to kind of basically set kind of like, almost the the final level of a track, and some people use it as kind of like a safety mechanism. You don't have to be with. All right, so say if I just wanted to, we have this particular file, so we listen to it, and let's say I just wanted to set a particular level of it. So whether the level is too low or too loud. So let's say when we double click, we go into our sample editor here. If I want to normalize it, we can go to our audio menu to processes, and we will choose normalize. So once we do this, I could say, I want this to peak at, -12. And as we do that, we notice that the amplitude of the waveforms got smaller. Or let's say it's a final mix down, and I'm just going to be gluttonous. I want it to be -1 dB. So I can now just take that and kind of boost the levels. And also when we're doing some different functions, we could just see our loudness normalizing. So if I wanted this to be at -23, or if it's going to be for like a streaming service, and this is my final mix, I could just say, okay, make it -14 LUFS. And that way we know that that particular file has been normalized to the correct gain structure that's being expected. So. So you see kind of a further clarification on sample rates. As I can understand it, it will be a problem to start an example in 44.1 and continue to 48K. You could convert the sample rate easily just in Cubase, and we've shown it on previous live streams. But kind of with a project, once you pick a sample rate, it's probably best to stick with that particular sample rate if you have the option. All right, so we have Steve Leeds checking in from the San Francisco Bay Area. We see Tim Weinheimer from Mission Viejo. Michael Teams wants people to smash the like button. All right, we see JVI on the live stream. He's just thanking us for doing the live streams. He always learns something, so. Okay, so you see kind of a further clarification on the mono stereo plugins. I guess it's a follow-up on the mono/stereo plugins. I use a lot of UAD plugins, and if I load a mono plugins on a stereo track, I get no warning, and the plugin only affects the left side. So yeah, some plugins may be kind of coded to do that, but try to be aware of it. And some people will do it, intentionally for effects, but try to and obviously Universal Audio isn't VST3 yet. We hope to see that soon, and that could probably fix a lot of these issues. All right, so we have Rich checking in from South Florida. Okay, so we see, and Rich's question, I asked this the last time, but may have missed the answer. Is there a way to see the marker track in the key editor when it's popped out full screen? So let's say if I'm in my key editor here and we are in full screen mode and I want to see the marker tracks. Since version 11, we added the capability of global tracks. So now we could see marker tracks, as well as chord track data and transpose tracks. So if you have markers, let's say I will come over here and I'll just drop in some markers. So now when I double click and we go to our full screen key editor, we can now see kind of all of our markers here. So go to the global tracks, you'll see in version 11, and then you could just say, okay, I just want to see all of my marker tracks, and that way we can see the markers directly embedded within the key editor, like so. Okay, so I just see from Fire Signals, how long is the free trial? So I think the Cubase trial is for 30 days. The Nuendo trial might be longer, but most of the trial versions will be for 30 days. Okay, so we have a question. Greg, please explain the Project Root Key, how to use it, and when we need it. Thanks for your amazing work. Okay, so when we could set Project Root Key, this is kind of, relevant to, some different audio loops as we want to listen to different loops, or when we work with MIDI loops, for instance, can respond to different keys. So, we had a program called SQL, and that would allow you to, and if the metadata of the audio file said, okay, this is in the key of E, and our root key was set to D, that with the metadata, it would automatically, as we dropped it in, the tracks would follow the key. A lot of audio loops don't have that particular metadata. So we see it sometimes with, MIDI loops as well that can have keys that are kind of determined. So that's what the project root key is. So if I was kind of starting a project, I could start the root key and I could say, okay, as I drag in like a clavinet or a bass part, for MIDI, they would automatically transpose to match the project root key. Some audio tracks will do that, but most don't because they don't have the metadata in it. All right. So we have a question. Do you mind showing a quick example of setting up Spectral Analyzer for multiple tracks? Okay. So let's go ahead and take a listen. So if I wanted to do this, sorry, just had an email. Let me check real quick. Okay. I'll respond to that after. All right. So okay, so say we want to do kind of a spectral analysis for multiple tracks. So if we wanted to come over here, let's say okay. Okay, so I'm going to have multiple tracks going on here. So if I wanted to see it kind of all from one place, if I put it even something like so I will come over here and let's just drop in a just supervision. Okay, so if I wanted to now come over here, we'll say, okay, I want to see spectrum bar. So if we wanted to see that, now we could do this on the stereo bus, but we could also kind of sidechain in. So if we wanted to see that, that's global. Now we could just simply insert. If you want to see it on different tracks, you could just come right over here and at this point say, okay, I want to go to supervision, and we'll switch this to our spectrum bar. So now I'm only seeing one particular track. And let's say I just want to see the piano. And we could have these kind of automatically follow the coloring of the particular tracks as well. So if I wanted to go to this piano and go to inserts, so this way we could see the colors from different tracks and see them kind of all at once. So let me know if that's what you wanted to see. All right, so we had a question. Will you demonstrate separation of waves in spectral layers? Cubase 11 Pro, Windows 10 from Sable. Okay, so let me just open up a particular file. Okay, so spectral layers is pretty amazing for this. It's a bit like unbaking a cake, as I describe it. Okay, so let's say as we're playing a file here, so let's say a live recording. So we have drums, bass, guitar, and vocals. So what I'm going to do is go to my audio, and let's say we'll go to extensions, and we'll load up spectral layers. So now that I've done this, we can go to layer, and we'll say unmix stems. So spectral layers 1 that comes with Cubase will allow you to unmix the vocals. But now I could come right over here, and it's going to just kind of do its magic. And what it's basically doing, it's separating the instruments from the 2-track file here. So as we want to listen, drums. And say I want to mute the vocals. And we'll bring the vocals back in, let's say.
Oh, and it ain't even crossed your mind that if you feel the urge to see
Or
me,
if you want to come over
well,
here.
you best pretend you're blind. But all the reasons I left you behind, I just have to remember.
And let's say even if we add harmonies in.
I don't care about you anyway. No, no, no. I don't care about what you've got to say. Argue when I say it to your face.
So I always describe it as like, you know, I may have mentioned it before, but kind of taking the eggs out of a cake after it's been made. So, all right, so we have Tiago from Brazil checking in. Thank you. And John A. Walker is just saying it's great to be here. So we're glad you could be part of the community today. All right, my chat field jumped to me. All right. Okay, so we just see, hello. So what happens to us who don't have an operating system compatible with Cubase 12? You know, it's at some point, you know, like we don't run OS 9 on Mac. We don't run Windows 98 anymore for the most part. You know, a lot of people don't run Windows XP. You know, so then, you know, you could give it a try and see how it works for you. But, you know, and I'm sure usually, you know, shortly after release, there's a trial version that people could try. And sometimes it's not that it doesn't run, but it's that it hasn't been tested. So, but at some point, you know, as we are compatible with, you know, contemporary operating systems, other operating systems will be dropped off, and sometimes it's kind of mandated almost by the manufacturer. So, you know, so some platforms do that more than others. And they probably want you to buy a new computer would be my guess. All right, so we see David Griffith checking in from Wales. David Griffiths wants everyone to hit the like button so we can keep this excellent resource going. Thank you for the statement. All right, so we have a question, follow up on normalizing. Is the track modified in any way besides the volume when normalized? So as we normalize an audio file, it doesn't modify any of the settings in the track. But, you know, as you increase the gain on the file itself, it may get louder and it may affect, you know, if you're running dynamics plugins or other plugins on that particular track. But the track settings are kind of independent of the normalizing process. All right, so we just have a question. Hi, Greg. Greetings from Finland. Is there a way to send a specific CC1 value to a MIDI track as a key command, a macro, perhaps? So if you want it to, like, you know, have your file start like at a particular level, so like sometimes I know people want like a sample library to start at a particular you know, they need the modulation to be set to a, you know, like a value of 96 or whatever to kind of start with the sound that they want. One way to do this, it's pretty easy, is just a MIDI insert plugin. So if we come over here, let's go to going to be MIDI control. So at this point, we could say every time that this track starts on controller, let's say CC1, I want this to start off at 96. So now every time that this track plays back, it will play back as if there is a modulation value of 96 to start with. So, and we could do this for up to 8 MIDI plugins or 8 different MIDI controllers. And then we could have, 4 of those particular MIDI plugins embedded on it. So you don't have to create a macro to do it. You could actually just kind of put this on. And if you need to set it and forget it, you could just kind of close the MIDI control plugin. But that information will automatically always start the project. So if you need a specific modulation value to be at the dynamic level you want, consider using the MIDI control right there. All right, and we have Cedric checking in from India. Thanks for joining us. You realize it's very late or very early there. All right, we have Jean-Marie Horvat. Glad that you could be here today. Here we see Cedric just got a Wacom tablet. I never got one of those, but it looks like fun. Always have a messy desk and not much desk space. All right, so we see from Alexander, and this is kind of a follow-up about the root key. Says, by mean the root key at, excuse me, at the top of the bar near the toolbar, it's the same. Seems that we can change the root key in a project. If all my MIDI's in D, I can assign them to E. So let's see if it's maybe up here. So maybe the project and root key. All right, so when we come here, so I think, yeah, it's the same settings. So when we do this, but, if you wanted to, probably the best way, if you wanted to just, change all of your, different elements, especially for MIDI parts, is, if you go to the transpose setup, you could take all, selected MIDI events and raise it up 2, but you could also do scale correction. So you could say, I'm starting in D major and I want it to go to, E harmonic minor. We could also do kind of scale correction as well. So, if you wanted to just kind of switch keys or just have it automatically follow like the chord track as well, is another great way. All right, we see, hi, Greg. If I duplicate one track and pan it left and right, how can I use them as one if I want to add VST effects? I need to add 2 of them, for example. All right, so let's say if I come, and I'll just do a new project here. Or I'll jump back over to one of our other projects quickly. Okay, so let's say if I have an effect here, so let's say I want to take, this track here, this bass part, and we'll duplicate that. So I'm going to duplicate the track. All right, and let me just activate the project. Sorry about that. And so now we'll right click, duplicate the track. So when we do this, they are two separate tracks. So if you wanted a plugin to be in both of them, you could do that. So if it's an insert effect, we could, so let's say this one is going to be panned hard left, and this one will be panned hard right. Okay, so if we, if you want to run one plugin that's on both of those, if it's going to be ascend, it's not going to be a problem. But if you wanted to run one plugin for both tracks, you could select those, and then you could add a group channel to the selected tracks, and then if you needed to really run just only a single instance of the plugin. At this point, you could now both of these tracks are feeding a stereo group, and we could put a plugin on the stereo group just like that. Or just, taking the particular tracks and adding an effects channel to the selected channels as well. So, but, if you have two different tracks, you're going to need to group them, or to have one single plugin, but it's easy enough just to have multiple plugins if you needed to. All right, so we have a question. Says, Greg, some of my VST's windows seem to disappear, but they come back. Like, is there a key to press or a way to stick or hold window on top? So a lot of times when we're dealing with plugins, we could come over here, and let's say if we have an insert, I'll put on just like a bass amp here. So if I wanted to, so probably what you're running into is as you click somewhere else, that this plugin window goes away, and then you have to open it up again, but maybe you want to see the plugin window. So try right clicking or control clicking, and then you'll see that on the window that you want, and this works for many different windows, but you'll see always on top. And now I can click away from that without this window disappearing. So I could come here, make an edit. I could say, okay, I just want to take this particular part and cut it, and let's grab my eraser, and this window doesn't disappear, but as soon as I turn always on top off, as soon as I uncheck that and I click elsewhere, that particular window will disappear. So let me know if I misunderstood. All right, so we have a question. Is there a way to automate third-party plugin parameters yet with as much ease as Steinberg plugins? Thank you from Wales. So I think if it are written to take advantage of that, but it's really any plugin parameter. If you want it to reveal like the automation strip, and this works for any plugin parameter. So let's say if I'm on this bass track and this works with, and we have a setting that we could do with, that is reveal parameter on right. So probably if you want to automate something, you're gonna, if you want to draw in automation. So as I come over here, if I wanted to reveal the parameter, as soon as let's say I'm on this track, and we see that there's no automation lanes open. And as soon as I come here and I adjust one of the parameters, that parameter automatically shows up directly right there. So, try going to the automation panel and going to settings, and then activate reveal parameter on right. And then that way the plugin parameter window will automatically show up. just that easily. You know, some of the Steinberg plugins, I believe it's part of the VST3 specification. I could confirm that just to make sure, but when we go to edit them, we could also just show bass, show this particular automation track. So I could just come right there, and now that will open up that particular automation lane, and you could do it just like that, but not all plugins are kind of coded fully to specification. All right, so we see Pablo Vasquez on the live stream from Galicia, España. Thanks. Great to see Pablo on the live stream. Loyal attendee. Wonderful drummer. Michael Teams is very happy to see him on. Okay, so we just see kind of follow-up question about the normalizing. Says, so sorry, I meant to say, is normalizing modified the WAV file itself? Sorry, again, English is not my native language. I'm sure it's much better than my French. So if you normalize the file, it is processing the particular file. So let's say if I come here and normalize the audio file. So we'll just come over here to audio, to processes, and we'll choose to normalize it. All right, so we can see that this will be increased. So let's say we want to do peak to -1 dB. So this has gotten louder. But the beautiful thing of the system, when we normalize it, even after doing edits, I open it up like 10 years later, Cubase can store that information. So you could right click and you could just say delete the normalizing. And the original unaffected audio file will be maintained, as well as the normalized file. So you could always go back if you need to. All right, so we have a question. Is there any way to get video files to be included inside the project folder on import? Okay, let me just see. Might be a preference for this. All right, let's give it a shot. So I'll do a new project. Okay, and let me import my video file. All right, so now when we come over here and we get to our pool window, you can see all right, so it's in a different folder, but let's see if I come now and I choose to prepare archive. So if you just do a prepare archive, you could say, okay, now I want to copy the video file. And at that point, the video file will automatically just be carried over into the project folder for you. So while it's not done on import, just a simple media prepare archive will place the video file into the particular project folder. All right, so we have music all day from Ypsilanti, Michigan. It says Ipsy, but I'm assuming it's Ypsilanti. All right, and a follow up to the video question for all the projects I already have where the video is missing in the project folder. How can I see where the video is typically? So once again, if we go to the pool window, and then you'll see just a video folder, and scroll over to the right, you can see the path directly there for the video window. And then the question, what's the best way to fix the existing projects? And again, just the right click and prepare archive function. All right, so you see just a comment from Nick. I saw an email come through, but I didn't get a chance to read it. It says, I'm getting these random bursts of noise, insanely loud, almost like loud ring mod blast, happens on random instruments, no other plugs on track, please help. So, if you wanted to isolate, I know it could be frustrating if something like that's happening. Generally, it could be, I've seen plugins when they kind of are misbehaving that cause this. So see if you're seeing the loud noise in the meters, or if it's, and then that could isolate it, or if it's just happening where you see it, if you see the noise in the meters in the mix console in Cubase, that could help. And I could take a look at it, maybe remotely right after the live stream, and see if that makes any difference. But, let us know if it's in the actual meters that you're seeing it. Okay, so we have a question, how to copy and paste plugin from different tracks. Okay, so I'll just add number of audio tracks here, and let's look at it in the mix console. So let's say if I wanted to put a compressor on this particular track. So I think if we hold down the Alt or Option key, that we can just copy across different tracks. So let's say if I'm here and I've now compressed those settings, so just holding down the Alt or Option key, and now as we do that, we can see that those settings are preserved. If we have a number of different plugins as well, so let's say I'm here and I have a filter and let's say a pitch shifter, and I wanted to copy this whole chain of multiple plugins to other selected tracks. What we could do is I'm going to just select all of these tracks. If I hold down my Shift key this time, that would help. And I'm going to, at the bottom here, right click, and then you'll see copy first selected channel settings. And what I'm going to do is go to the other channels and right click at the bottom of the name in the mix console, and we could say paste settings to selected channels. And since I selected all those channels, we can now have kind of those different plugin settings automatically carry over as well. So a couple different ways. All right, so we see it's 91 in the house today for Cedric, and I think he's based in India. All right, so I just see, sorry, I mean like with LFO. So I think maybe this was with the plugins question about using third-party plugins. So, if you wanted to one method, and I could be mistaken, that, yeah, sometimes if you reference a question from earlier, it could be 30 questions later, and I don't remember who asked exactly which questions, unfortunately. But let's see if we can show how to do like a quick LFO. And this will work kind of with any particular Okay, so let's say if I want to do kind of like, let's say an LFO here, so all right, so if we come to our MIDI, like our MIDI inserts, we could have different LFOs for, different instruments here. So let's say if now we look at this, we'll look at this particular instrument and say, okay, we're going to play, we'll just solo this. And when we open the instrument, now we could assign different LFOs to different parameters through this MIDI insert. So what I want to do is just do panning. So we can say, okay, I wanted this to be like, every 2 measures. And I wanted to also do volume. So we can see that these will actually just kind of adjust the different parameters. Now let's look at the bass. And when we go to look at our bass instrument, we can come over here. And if we wanted to kind of do like a wobble, kind of like that, we could now just activate the LFO for this particular instrument. So we say we want this to do So we can say we want just to do 16th notes, or let's say 8th note triplets. And now if we want to do this for parameters where we don't have a MIDI learn, we could go into, I'm going to create a MIDI loopback, and you could use like IAC or loopback on other on Windows or IAC on Mac. And I'm going to just set this when we go to our studio setup. So I will now have this kind of automatically. So if I wanted to have a particular plugin on this, I'm going to send MIDI out and see if I can remember how to do this. But we'll go to our generic remote, and we want to say, I want to learn, and we're going to say it's coming in from, and you can do it through IAC, but I don't have IAC turned on and activated. Let me see if I could get that. Yeah, I think I deactivated IAC, but then you could do kind of a loop back to send it through other instruments. So, but let me know if that's kind of what you want it to do. And I can have IAC installed for Friday's live stream if you want to see it. All right. So we see. How do I control my Chronos with Cubase? When you say control the Chronos, let me know. What exactly you want to control. So you could obviously send MIDI in and out, from the Chronos, into Cubase and be able to sequence and use the sounds and use that as a MIDI controller. But once you have that done, for the Chronos, you would probably just have to come over here and add a MIDI track, and you could call it Chronos. And at this point, you want to just, whatever MIDI program change and bank change that you set, and then you could set the MIDI output port where your Chronos is connected, and then you could, have full access to your Chronos. All right, so we see a question. Hi, Greg. What is the best way to create audio tracks on different tracks if the tracks of the MIDI file are not linked to Halion, but to Genos? Render in place does not work. Thank you. So I guess the Genos is a hardware. Let me just... All right. I think the Genos is that maybe the Yamaha hardware. So when we say the render in place does not work, thank you. So if you're going to be doing hardware based, you could come over and create an external instrument in the audio connections. My guess is, and this would like to have one particular audio, one particular audio return, going directly into Cubase per instance of that. And it's probably not likely. So most people, if they're working with external instruments, they would just have to, record like a stereo output into the particular engine, but if it's hardware based, you might have to just, physically play and record all of the channels going out to your hardware, send the MIDI information out to it and record the outputs as audio. And that's, some of the reasons why the convenience of the workflow isn't there. And that's why a lot of people have migrated to using software instruments. So, but let me know, just if you could let me know if the Genos is just a piece of hardware, but it has to, if that's generating the tones, you could do like probably one output at a time as an external instrument, or, just you'll have to route the audio out from that keyboard into the particular audio interface and record it. Okay, so we have a question. Can I move all the Cubase content to another drive, samples, loops, etc.? Okay, so when we come here, there's a utility that you get with Cubase called the Steinberg Library Manager. So this is installed with Cubase. And if we just kind of come right over here, we can say, okay, we're going to go to our Cubase content, and we could see all the different sound libraries here. And all you'd have to do is click on Move and then choose the new drive location. So click on Move. It'll ask you where you want to move it to, and then you can move all the content to that folder. So if you are running out of hard disk space on your internal drive, and like you just got a new drive like an SSD, you could just simply migrate everything to the SSD using the Move. So look for the Steinberg Library Manager utility. It's installed with Cubase, and then you can move all of the content. Okay, so I see from Nick, who had a question about the noise. So I see, yes, the noise is in the meters, starting from the root track. So, let me know if, also if changing your buffer size on your audio interface, if that makes a difference, or if you have another audio interface NIC to try, and let us know if, if that is, what audio interface that you're using as well. And when you say starting from the root track, is at the very top track? And is it virtual instruments or audio tracks that it's starting with from the root track? Okay, so we see a question. How do you install plugins to Cubase? So if it's VST3 plugins, they will automatically go into a location that Cubase will look for. If it's a VST2 plugin, it'll go into a folder, and you could tell Cubase to look in particular folders for the plugins. So as we do this, if we go to our VST plugin manager from our device menu and we go to the settings page, at this point we could click on the plus sign and we could add folders. So as we add folders, basically we tell Cubase to automatically look for any VST plugins in that particular folder. If you're like a Windows user, don't make the mistake of putting like your Windows system folder, because then every driver on your particular system will show up as a VST plugin and it'll get blacklisted and it won't be fun. So, but as you install VST plugins, always have a good idea of what folders that they're being installed into. Many VST2 plugins will allow you to pick the folder during installation. Some will be fixed, and you just have to come over here and define the VST2 plugin paths once the plugin is installed. So you don't really have to specifically install it for Cubase, but just tell Cubase where to look. Once you've defined a new folder, you could just click on the rescan all, and that will go through and rescan the particular folder for plugins, and they will be accessible in your Cubase projects. So we see a question: is there a specific requirement you could advise to run Cubase on a computer other than the basics that come on the box, DAW? So if you're looking for computer requirements, is obviously the more RAM, the more processors, the faster processors you have, you'll be able to do more with. And sometimes investing now in more RAM allows you to keep that computer longer. So that may mean that if you spend a little more money on RAM now, that computer may last you another 2 years, versus a computer where maybe you won't be able to find the same components when it's 7 years old. So some stuff like that. But try to get as much storage space, because you never seem to have enough. Get it as fast a processor, get as many of those processors, then you should be in good shape. All right, so we see a question. Hey, Greg, I have Cubase Elements and Windows 10. ASIO for all is set to 512. However, I don't see any latency. I have made a few projects at 25 tracks max, never noticed any latency. How come? So there may be latency in the system. So when you go to, it may not be apparent, but there's always going to be some form of latency on the system. So I don't have ASIO for all, but when we look at if we go to your device menu to device setup and we click on the audio system here, so under here you may see ASIO for all, you would probably see the latency calculated and indicated directly there. So some people may not notice the latency. Some people, it would bother them a great deal. And sometimes if you're tracking with plugins, and those plugins can add latency as well. So, you can work around where latency isn't an issue, or you can make sure that latency will be an issue if you're tracking through 4 multiband compressors on input. Okay, so we see a question from David Griffith. Sorry, I skipped over this one. This question is: my MIDI activity monitor continues to display activity pulsing even when I'm not playing the project. I don't have any external hardware instruments. I do have a MIDI controller keyboard. So many times, and if I had I don't have my CC121 connected now, but a lot of controllers may send. It's almost like kind of almost like a little handshake saying that I'm here. So even if you're not transmitting MIDI information, it may be sending kind of communications like a system. I'm just blanking on a name, like a system status message. So at that point, so there are times, or active sensing is what it's called, so that the controller is transmitting kind of MIDI information saying, hey, I'm here. Hey, I'm here, and we can think of it as the DAW can then say, okay, it's like a handshake between the two. So it's usually nothing to be concerned about, but some controllers and some MIDI keyboards will constantly transmit active sensing information. Yamaha keyboards do it a lot. And that's why you may notice, like, you may see the activity when it seems like you're not doing anything. Okay. Okay, so we see from Michael Romanowski just saying, I wish you could apply a channel preset or an insert press on multiple tracks at the same time. So let's go ahead and let me just jump back to a different project here. So I think I may have messed up, but let's take a look at it again. All right, so say we have our audio 1 through 8 here. We'll look at our mix console. Okay, so I'll just do a quick track preset. Okay, so I'm going to right click and let's copy the first channel settings, and I'll do it to these tracks here, and then paste selected channels to new tracks. So you could just kind of right click on the channel name in the mix console and then, copy the selected channel settings and then paste it to other ones. So give that a try, Michael, and let me know if that makes sense. And another way to do this, if we have all these set to Q-Link, so let's say I wanted to add, let's say I have these 3 tracks selected and I have Q-Link turned on, that I could just say, okay, I wanted to apply an EQ, and we could apply that EQ to all of the different channels. So as I come here, we could notice that and then you could link those particular settings if you wanted to. So let me know if that works for your workflow, Michael. Great to see you on the live stream. Okay, so we just see from Pedro just saying auto LFO only works for VSTIs, should be doable for all plugins. So let me go to my audio MIDI setup. I'll go to utilities. And let's go to our audio MIDI setup, and I'll see if we could activate the see if we can add this. But you can do it for sometimes IACs. Okay, so we'll just call this okay. And let me see if I go back to the project. But you can do LFOs for audio plugins as well. So let's see if I can get this going. Okay, so what I want to do is I'm going to just send a MIDI track with a plugin here. So we'll just, I'm going to take this particular MIDI track and we're going to send its output to IAC bus. I modified my IAC bus to work with Stream Deck. And so, and on this particular MIDI track, we're going to send as a MIDI insert, we want to just come over here and say, we're going to do the auto LFO. All right, and we're going to do this, let's say, on MIDI controller 10. Okay. So I'm going to go over to my studio setup, and let's go to our generic remote. All right, so I want to just click on learn here. Okay, and what I want to do now is to have, I have a plugin on this particular channel. So let's say the glitch drums. So I want to go to my glitch drums channel, and let's come over here to device, and let's go to all right, and let me just find a parameter. So I think I just put like a filter. Let me find the parameter I'm looking for. Okay, so I want dual filter. Okay, so we'll now come over, and I realize this is convoluted. So we'll say mixer, glitch drums, and we want to go to inserts, And we'll go to here and we'll say our position. So now as we do this, we're going to send MIDI information over. So now this LFO is controlling the audio effect here. So we'll come over here to our inserts. So let's say I want this to be set to a whole note. So that's how you could do. So you just need to do a quick MIDI loop back. I can say, okay, every 2 bars. Or change the LFO. So you can do LFOs for audio plugins too. It's a little convoluted, I realize, but it can be done if you really want to do it. Once you set it up once, it's pretty straightforward. So create a MIDI track, set the auto LFO directly on that MIDI track, send it to like a generic remote, and then have that generic remote send to the particular automatable parameter, and then you could just have your LFO done for audio. So it's not limited to just VST instruments. So it's doable for all plugins. All right. Great to see Millard Brown on the live stream. Okay, so we have just a follow up to the drum bus question from earlier. Can you explain pre-post fader sends for going to drum crush group, and is it best practice to send or route the drum group? Is it best practice to send or route to drum group? What are the pros and cons? So, if you're doing parallel stuff and you don't want so let's say if we'll just jump back over to this particular project. Okay, and we'll see if I still have my group set up. So, okay, so I still have groups set up here. So let's say I wanted to create kind of my, we'll just see if we have, okay, so we have group 1 and group 2. So I want to select all of my tracks here. And I will just put these in. So I'm going to send, not inserts, but rather, okay, so we have our drums that are going to group 1 and 2. Now we could have these be pre or post. So, if you wanted I think a lot of people would choose to do, to not have the fader have an effect on it. Because, as we come here, we can now have our drums going into both destinations when we do this. So let's say as we're listening to our drums, that if I wanted to squash the one channel here, or I'll just do it real quick with. So now we're going to have heavy compression on this one. So, I think it makes sense if you're doing parallel to, not have the fader affect the gain staging, so that, you're not having that as another factor. And let me just make sure that is it best practice to send or route to the drum group? So I often will come over here and, still have it, and I will just use instead of the routing, I will just kind of use these two sources just to kind of blend between the two and find a sweet spot. So I think, those are methods that a lot of people will use. Okay, so to see from a question on the auto LFO record output to track, how do I have it display under the MIDI in the automation lane versus the MIDI editor lane? Okay, so let's say if we jump back to our LFO project, that we do this. Okay, so let's say if I wanted to just come over here, let's say I'll do the instrument itself. So let's say I have my auto LFO here. All right, so now we record it, kind of a new part, and let's see what's... All right, so we're gonna have our chords here, and let's see what's in this part. I'll just look at it in the list editor. So it's just really kind of the controller, but if you... So how do I have it display under the MIDI in the automation lane versus the MIDI editor lane? So it's probably going to be, there's settings for this. If we go to the CC automation setup, and you could choose different controllers to show up as automation or as controllers in the MIDI part. So look under the MIDI controller automation setup, and then you could pick whether it's going to automation lane or into an actual part. All right, so we have a question from Steve Allen. So is there a keyboard or generic remote shortcut for direct monitoring on and off? I can't find it, but maybe I'm just being dumb. So I don't think that there is. I was looking for it before, but I'll take a quick look again and just see. But yeah, it'd be nice to toggle. Like a lot of times what I do is just open up the device setup window. If I could type, that would help. Yeah, so I'm assuming, Steve, that's going to be like the studio setup and go to audio system, where you could just turn the direct monitoring on and off there. So I don't think that there is a way. I'll just take a look in generic remote as well and see if there's anything in there, but that would be handy. So say if we go to command and yeah, so you could open up the setup window, but not toggle direct monitoring on or off. But I'll pass that along as a feature request. Okay, so we have a question from Paul Evans. Hi, Greg. What is render in place, and what scenario would you utilize it? So let's say I just wanted to take, let's say I have a big project, and I want this to actually, instead of playing through a very intensive VST instrument. What I wanted to do instead is to play just an audio file. So what render in place would allow you to do is to very easily come and just say, okay, I want to go to my edit menu, and it's going to allow us to take our different settings here, and we'll just say we're going to render, and it's going to turn that selection into an audio file. So now we're not utilizing like maybe a heavy synthesizer. And I could also do this and render all of the effects. So if we go to our render settings, we could just kind of come over here. So say if I had a number of effects on, and I could do this for MIDI routed to virtual instruments or directly to audio tracks. So if I will show you the render settings this time, that would help. So sorry about that. So when we go to render in place, there's render settings, and we'll have different options. Like if we had multiple events, we could have those still be separate events or as block events or as one contiguous event. We could add tails. We could choose to be dry or add EQs and inserts, and sends, as well as master effects. We could have different naming conventions, different paths. But, you know, the simple answer is most people would use it to turn a virtual instrument into audio and have it, you know, maintain the channel color, and you could apply all of the effects routing and all the signal processing within the rendered file very easily. All right, so we have a question: what is the fastest way to randomize velocity? Okay, so let's say I have, probably the fastest way is just to come here and just kind of draw in velocity. If you wanted to, I'm sure there's logical editors set up. So if I wanted to go to the logical editor function, we could say I want to transform notes, and we want to say value 2, and we could say just set to relative random values, and we could set this, let's say 40 and 120. So at this point I could just have all of my, let's see if I did that right. So let's just say set random values between 40 and 100. So once you do that, that's a pretty easy way of doing it. You could also, on a track, if that is, you could go to the MIDI modifiers. So at this point, I could just say, we'll see our MIDI modifiers. And then you could choose to have random targets, such as randomizing velocity between different ranges there as well. So 3 ways of kind of doing it quickly. Okay, so we have a question. Hey, Greg, is there a way to do program changes without using the list editor? So, you know, if you want to, you know, you could just go to the MIDI part here and select program change and just kind of draw in program changes just like that. But if it's going to be a program and bank message change, you could also directly from, you could do your program change messages directly here. So if I just add an instrument, let's say I add an instrument track or a MIDI track here, I could now come over and we could send our program changes on the MIDI track directly and bank messages directly there. Okay, so we have a question from JVI. Is there a way to render in place but with a different name so as not to replace the current file? So say I have this, and this file is called Mellotron 01. So if I come to render in place and we go to our render settings, you could just click on use custom name. So let's say I just wanted to come here. I'll render this. So now when I click on render, it's going to create a new file for us, and it'll be called JVI. So once again, go to the edit to render in place, go to your render settings, and then you'll see use custom name. And then you could apply your custom name to the file before it's created. All right, so we see from Chris62, it says, hi from Vienna, Austria. Thanks to Greg for explaining all the features of Cubase. It's great to learn things that help me create my music. So it's great. Vienna, Austria is on my bucket list of places to go. So maybe my next trip to Germany, I'll try to sneak off to Vienna. All right, so we have the question. If I move my sound library to another drive using the file manager, the library manager, will I have to tell my existing projects where to look for those files? So with the Steinberg content, you won't. So as long as it'll make that connection that when we go for audio files that were used in this particular content and we defined a new location, it knows to go to that new location or for all the samples. So all that's kind of, that hand holding is done kind of in the background so you don't have to worry about it. Okay, so we have a question. When I drag an instrument track to its channel, the channel is not immediately selected. It jumps to 2 tracks above. Very strange. So let's say if I come over here, we'll go to media and I'll go to my VST instruments. So let's say if I want to drag it in between these 2 tracks here, so I'll grab Pad Shop and drag it in. And we'll just, so it should be loaded up. Sometimes, it could be a factor of if these particular tracks, maybe I've seen sometimes, let's say if these are in a folder, and maybe if we drag like a retro log between, let's see if it goes into the folder. So it could be that maybe it's not, it might go to the top of a folder. So if it's in a folder, that might change the status, but it seems to kind of work as expected here. Okay, so I just see, do you have an example of clipping versus limiting? So let's see if we can just do it on a project here. Okay, let me just we'll do it on this project. Okay, so I'll just put this on my master bus. Make sure I'm not going to kill everyone volume-wise. So if we wanted to go to our dynamics, we're going to have a soft clipper. I think it's under dynamics. Maybe it's under distortion. And let's go to a limiter. Okay, so this is our soft clipper. This is our limiter, and we'll just go ahead and listen to it here.
I got some cheap wine. Let's have a good time.
And I'll try to put them for maybe a similar style preset.
I'm gonna stick around. But if you're missing me, let it be. Hit the road. Gonna rock. Gonna roll.
So if we wanted to adjust our output even louder.
Hit the road. Gonna rock. Gonna roll. And I'm going.
Then let's say it now with our limiter.
We're gonna get it right.
So say I'll just do more punch
We're
here.
gonna take it up and maybe start a fight. Now time is running out, but I'll be back again. Until the next time, it's not the end. Hit the road, gonna rock, gonna roll. I got no control. Hit the road,
And let's say limiter.
gonna roll, and I'm go. Hit the road, gonna rock, gonna roll.
So you can experiment with both of them, but the soft clipper is a kind of a cool plugin that a lot of people underutilize. So check that one out. Okay, so we just see a question: can we export video with adding bar and beats like we add time code to video? So currently it's just set to the SMPTE time code because that's how the video is broken down. So currently I don't know of a way of doing that. All right, so we see Michael Pierce has made his soup contribution to the group today, and it's going to be a green minestrone, leeks, peas, spring greens, garlic, and celery, cannelloni beans. But the twist is you get to add tortellini of your choice, impossibly cream. So sounds like a great soup, Michael. Now I want to go eat soup, and I have another couple hours to go. So. All right, so it says, Greg, thanks. Toggling between always on top VST windows, now working. VST still seem to disappear. Still, if I'm using click mouse outside of Cubase main monitor, will in my monitor 4-screen setup. So it should kind of work across multiple screens. You know, I run 2 screens in my studio. And don't really have any issues with I just have a single screen on my current computer that I'm kind of presenting from, but I don't think the always on top behavior changes. But maybe what happens a lot of times is there may be other windows which are also set to always on top, and when you go over there, those windows may cover up other windows that are set to always on top. So they're going to be so much always on top. So try right-clicking on some of the other windows and see if they are set to always on top as well. All right, so we see from Costas saying, this is so precious. Thank you, Greg, so much. Big hi to the rest of the participants from Greece. Well, thank you for the kind words. I'm glad that I get to be able to help people. All right, my chat field just jumped. So we see from Nick Saya just mentioning about the noise he's having. It's coming from instrument channels. They don't have any other plugins on them. Again, it's random. I'll be working in BAM. So I realize that can be frustrating. If you could let us know if it's like coming from one particular instrument. I've seen sometimes where it could be an instrument just a particular preset or setting on the instrument that could, cause a software glitch that could cause kind of, like signal bursts like you're describing. All right, so we see from Michael Teams, I would love to see a real-time Atmos export option in Nuendo. Currently, there's no way to utilize external processing with Nuendo and Atmos masters. I'll pass that along as well, Michael. Thanks for the feedback. But I'll pass along. I have a meeting next week with some of the people. So. All right, so we see from Marcos Gomez says UR24C with 4 RCA outputs. Can I use them for analog gear? They'll be shown as newer outputs or not. About the TRS ones, so it says my idea is to use TRS for monitors and 2 of the RCAs for Alesis 3630. So I think it's the 24C that I'm running. I'll just check. So you have 4 discrete outputs in there, and I'm just but also make sure that you have. I know there's 2 mic pre's on the front, and where it's kind of positioned on my desk, I don't know if there is another line level input, like a return on the back. I think there is, but I'm not absolutely positive. But you'd probably want to have 4 inputs and 4 outputs. And I think if you want to do, work with external processing, get as many inputs and outputs as you can. Like, if you have the capability of getting like a UR44, that would probably serve you a little better. But if you have 4 inputs and 4 outputs, but I think it's 2 inputs and 4 outputs on the UR24C, but it's kind of buried under my desk. Okay, so we see a question. Hi, how do I get the track graphics in the track menu? So really, when you come here, you could just see this little box here. And this question I get is like, what is that empty box for? So if we just double click there, you can add different track graphics right there. So if I want to double click, say, okay, this, I want it to be, and coincidentally, they're all Yamaha instruments. But if I say, okay, I want this to be kind of like an old synth type of instrument, I could just come here and hit OK, and then you could load up kind of different track pictures like so. So say that's my snare drum, and this will carry over also into the large mix console. So if you wanted to jump here, you can see that you could have this. And one of the things that's really useful is if we actually just, if you double click here, you could actually add user pictures. So you can say, okay, I really like, I recorded a Warwick bass or a P bass, or I want to take a picture of what the guitar amp looks like. And we could actually store images within the project as well. All right, so we just see from Michael Romanowski at Coast Mastering. And Michael's an incredibly talented mastering engineer. So glad that he could join us for the live stream. So he's just saying, I cannot get effects chain preset to apply to more than one track at a time. I tried in the mixer. So let's try different track presets. So I'll do new. Okay, so I'm going to select, I'll just try this. I've never tried this before, but I'm going to select 8 tracks and put on Q-Link, and we'll see if I add a track preset for channels 1 through 8. All right, so let me just undo that. I'm going to try that one more time, see if I could do it this way. Okay, so it adds it to that. But I think if we I'll try one other method here. So let's say I select these 4, and we have Q-Link. Yeah, so I think you may have to add the track preset to one track and then copy. I know this, I'll reiterate this to the developers. Select those. I'm doing this from the lower zone mixer, and then paste selected. So we copied the channel settings, and now I paste those to it. And let me see if that works in the larger mixer as well. So I'll undo that. Let's look at our inserts here. So I'm going to select just the bottom here to copy first channel settings, and we'll select those, right click, and paste the channel settings. So if you get the track into one, it's a 2-step process or a 3-step process instead of 1 or 2. But let me know if that makes sense, Michael, if you get that to work the same way on your end. All right, and then he says, I think you use channel preset instead of effects chain preset. So let me do an effects chain preset. Okay, so I have that. So I'm going to right click on this. So I'm going to select the track first, and then I will copy the first channel settings. So that's a selected channel. And then I'm going to select these here, and we'll see if this works. And then paste settings channels. So that seemed to work for me. But make sure that when you have to kind of click at the bottom to select the channels and see if that works for you, Michael. So that's with a track preset or an effects chain preset. Okay, reading through more comments. Thanks for all the great questions. And if you've learned something new, make sure that you do hit the like button and that you subscribe to the channel. All right, we see Mark Rabin says, I've been loving the drag chords to instrument track / MIDI track. Thanks, Greg. Yeah, it's a great tip. I think I discovered it by accident. So, all right, let's see. Wonderful discussion in Spanish between Pablo and Marcos. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. Couldn't find the answer anywhere. When I'm working on bigger projects, I sometimes find that the pre-count click kind of gets stuck before recording. Why is that? Is something not in sync? So let's say if we wanted to, let's say if we have, I'll just do, let's say a new project here. So if we have our pre-count, like our count in, and we're doing just a quick recording session. One thing that I haven't come across that, but one thing that you could try is, depending on, if you have a larger session, you may have a lot of different plugins. See if you get the same behavior. If you go to the bottom left-hand corner of your transport, you'll see the constrained delay compensation. See what happens if you activate the constrained delay compensation. What that will do is kind of bypass plugins that are causing a lot of latency. So you could try just to try activating the constrained delay compensation and see if that makes a difference in the behavior for you. All right, so we see from David K. Butler, if I record at 432 hertz, is there a way to adjust the Vari-Audio tuning parameters to 432 as well? So it's kind of fixed to 440. But what I know some people will do is, if you go to transpose and fine tune, what they'll do is adjust the fine tune. I think you would go up 8 or down 8. And then as you make the changes in Vari-Audio, that could, the scale could be applied to it. But, Vari-Audio is designed, I think the algorithm is designed to work at 440. But you could, let's see if we go into Vari-Audio. I don't think that we could just tune everything and then knock it down 8 cents, but I'll take a look just in case. Yeah, so I don't think that there's a way to kind of trim it down by like 8 cents. I mean, some people will just, do offline pitch shifting and then tune it for 40 and work with stuff like that. But I think the algorithm is intended for 440. All right. So we have a question. There's a way not like to record, follow the channel. Example, audio, record on channel 3. Then I click on another channels and the record stop from channel 3 and continued to every channel selected. All right. So let's say if we're doing this scenario, I have this channel selected and it's recording. So let's say I have this. So we just set an input here. Okay, so let's say as I'm recording, we have that selected. Then when I go to another channel, that change will automatically, when I select a different channel, that will take it out of record. So I think if we go to your preferences, so let's come over here to the preferences. I think under editing, project and mix console. So I think there's an enable record on selected audio track. So if you turn that off, so let's hit apply. And let's say I'm here and I'm recording. And then I select a different track. That track is still recording regardless of what channel other track is selected. So it kind of decouples the track selection from record enable. So that preference again is preferences to editing, project and mix console, and uncheck enable record on selected audio track. Thanks for all the great questions. So we see from Michael Pierce is saying Austria is on his bucket list of places to steal microphones from, probably from Dave the Songle. So, yeah, I got an Austrian Audio OC818, so it's a beautiful mic. So, but yeah, there's some good microphones in Austria. So. Okay, so we see from JVI, thanks, Greg, referring to the render in place with change name. That will definitely work for me. So thanks for reminding me, referencing which question worked for you. I appreciate it. So. All right, so we have a question. Can you render in place in real time with external processing? Yes, you can. So if you have an external processing path, it will render in place. It'll just do it in real time. So you see Mark Rabin just saying, that's cool, limiting versus clipping. So yeah, you can see what works best for your particular projects. And JVI saying, wow, soft clipper and limiter added a lot. Okay, my Chatfield just jumped on me. Okay, so I think I'm in the neighborhood where the questions were. Okay, so we just see a question. Is there a workaround where I can record the auto LFO to the automation lane directly, or should I use it as a separate MIDI track to be a global modifier? So, since it's not really an automatable parameter, you could have, if you're doing it, you could have the, if you want it to, like the auto LFO won't necessarily switch, but let's say if we jump back here, and I have like my glitch drums, let's say I have that filter on the drums going on. So let's see if it's... Okay, so I'm going to just switch this to the IAC bus again. And let's just open up the... I'll come over here. Let's get to the inserts on this particular track. So we'll have our filter. All right, so if I wanted to... Okay, so I'm just going to click on a quick MIDI learn here. All right, and let me just check my routing here really quick and see if we could... All right, so maybe when I came here and I added silly... Okay, let me try, since I changed the MIDI channel on that. Let's see if we can get it just to... Okay, so I see the bus. Let's see if we get the automation going for it. Okay, so I want this to go to our glitch drums, to our dual filter position. Okay, so it's a... So it's getting the address here, right? So let me just... Okay, so we have that going on. So let's say if I just automate this particular track. If that shows up. Okay, so let's see if we come over here for automation. If that was automated, now that we did that. So let me... All right, so when we look at this right here, we can see that, you know, since we automated, we just clicked on automation of the plugin that we're doing, that we could have the dual filter position automatically. Once we just automate that, then the LFO is generating the automation data directly right from there and writing it as automation. So whatever plugin that you're controlling via the LFO, those parameters can be automated and edited in the automation lanes. So let me know if that helps you out. All right, great to see Real Raven 2000 on the live stream. So he just indicated that he just had tortellini with a nice creamy tomato sauce, and he's so full. All right. All right, so we see does 32-bit about ERC making difference, or like you are with 24 bits, not so much. You know, the 32-bit conversion on like the URC interfaces, you know, if you want to have the best level of conversion, that's kind of a generation beyond what the original URs were. So I think that is the URC is a great choice, and it's USB-C, so it'll probably be lasting. It'll be a bit more future proof than other interfaces. All right, so Nick is just saying click like to support Greg's soup fund. So makes me sound poor, like I have a soup fund now. So, but I appreciate the sentiment. All right. So I see. Can I create audio tracks from stems using Spectralayer 7 Pro as an extension in Cubase? I believe you can. So yeah. So what you could do. Let's make sure it's the. Yeah. So once we're here, let's say we've done our unmixing. So let's say if I'm here, let's go to our audio menu, to extensions, and now we'll to start working, we'll launch the spectral layers, and let's do from layer unmixed stems. All right, so we'll again let it do its magic as it's unmixing. And I think this will work the same way for different layers. That once we have this done, so at this point we can say, okay, I just want it to take the vocals from here, and we could drag it out, and then at that point we could just have the vocal stem, so you could just drag these out right into the project window. So give that a shot from the layers section within spectral layers there. Okay, thanks for all the great questions. Okay. So we see Laura Burton's just mentioning about always on top with 2 screens. I've had issues with 3 screens. 2 works okay, but a 3rd screen clicking outside of one of the plugins drops everything out. If you have plugins on the 3rd screen. So Pablo is just saying, I need a coffee. Someone wants one? Yes, I'll take a mocha. So thank you. I think I'll have to get it after the live stream. Takes a while to get here from Galicia, España. All right, so we have Sergo joining us, Sergo Casimir. Thanks for joining us and being a part of the live stream today. All right, and we see Michael Teams is granted my family and myself 1 gallon of Kahula Mocha ice cream. So that's very generous. Thank you. Okay, reading through comments. Okay, still reading through comments. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. And again, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that and hit the like button, and that allows us to continue to do these live streams. All right, so we see from JVI just a question. Speaking off, is there a way to choose if things are always on top or always not on top? So it's really just kind of whatever the status that you choose. I think by default, a lot of things will be set to, may not be set to always on top. But just kind of in the little toolbar area up here, just try right clicking if you need to toggle the status of a particular thing. Not every window allows you to do it, but most of them do. We see from Mike Reeves, Greg, have you been demoing anything from Cubase 12? No, so I think it's kind of annoying if I demoed stuff that you guys couldn't have access to, and I could still be under kind of non-disclosure agreements and Northern German secrecy laws or something. So when it's out, I'll be happy to show it in detail to everyone. So. Right. See, my chat field jumped on me. Okay, so found my spot. All right, so we see, thanks, Greg, for copy of effects change. When copying track settings, the panning and routing are not included, correct? So I'm not sure if they are, but one thing that you could do is, if it's not, is come over here and take the selected channels, and you could take a mix console snapshot with this. So let's say we come over here and we could take kind of a snapshot of the different mix console status, and then when you go to recall a mix console status, we could just say, okay, so let's say if I have now adjusted different things and I've taken a mix console snapshot, you could right click here, and then you could say mix console snapshot recall settings. So at this point, you could just say, if it doesn't, you could just say, I just wanted to, the filters and let's say, panning, recall those from the previous snapshot, but not the levels or inserts or sends. So you can pick and choose different things to recall in a mix console snapshot. All right, Greg, what's the easiest way to zero out a mixer channel? Strip, sends, EQ, pre, inserts, meters, even. Some sections have reset, some don't. What I would do is just save this as, so say we have an audio track here. Sorry about that. And let's say we don't have any particular settings on it, and I think that you could probably come over here and let's save a track preset. So let's say so we'll say a save track preset, and we'll say, and there may be an init or default, something like that. So I'll just call this a preset of init. And then let's say I just went crazy with different settings. That you could just come over here and load a track preset. And you could, if you're clever, you would name it like AAA. But you could just do init, and then you could just reset everything like that. So that's one way of doing it, Mark. Much easier than doing the older method of SSL automation on E series or G series computers. All right, so we see Gareth on the live stream. So glad you can make it today. Okay. All right. So it just says when I make a one shot to a sampler track, for example, a hi hat, and it has a pattern already, is it possible to just let the same MIDI play another sample if I want to change the sound? All right. So let's just set this up really quickly. Okay, so let's just say if I have hi-hat, okay, so I'll make this a sampler track. So we'll say create sampler track. All right, so now we can, I'll just turn up my volume a little bit so we can hear it a little easier. Okay, so say hi-hat, and it has a pattern already. Is it possible to just let the same MIDI play another sample if I want to change the sound? So you could, as soon as we have, as soon as we have information here, we could just, have the MIDI play back this or other sounds. So, so I think you're fine with your question, but if I'm misunderstanding, just let me know. Okay, so I see that the LFO automation was it. So glad that figured that out for you. I see Gareth is saying soup for Greg. He has a family to feed, so there's just 3 of us. So we see from Uno Memento, does anyone have as much snow as we have in Finland? Will spring ever come? And maybe that Cubase 12 will come sooner than summer. So I think it'll be before summer. So, but just a speculation on my part. Okay, just reading through comments. So again, if you, so we see Best Green Jesus just saying, thanks for answering my complicated questions today. You're welcome. All right, so we see that Sten is in Tenerife. Sounds like a good place to be on vacation. All right, so we see this maybe with our hi-hat question. So how to have sample playback on sampler track for better sample selection, but hearing the MIDI playing instead of the one shot from the samples. You know, so if I'm here, let's say I'll just put this into just a quick. All right, so let's say I'll just come over here, grab my paintbrush, and I'll just put it in the drum editor here really quickly. So now we've done this, I can okay, so let's say if we have our samples playing, let's just say we're doing this. Okay, so how to have the sampler playback and sampler track for better sample selection, but hearing the MIDI playing instead of the one shot from the sample. So if we have MIDI here, now if we go to the sampler track itself, and I wanted to, so I'm not sure if you want to just come over here and maybe replace the sample. So say if I choose to lock the event, that I could just drag a different sample in. So I think if we do this, that I could so if that's what you want to do, so I'm sorry if I'm misunderstanding, but that's how you could play. And if you wanted to replace different one-shot samples just while it's playing, just drag and drop and make sure that the lock isn't turned on. Otherwise, you won't be able to replace the samples. Okay, so we see, let's see, from JVI, thanks for the on-top follow-up. Every plugin I open is set to default to always on top. I would actually prefer if it was as default not on top. Is that possible? So let me just take a look. There may be a preference. maybe it's under project mix. Let me just see if I can find what I'm thinking of. Okay, so if you go to your preferences to VST and under plugins, you could uncheck, I think this is the default status, but you could uncheck plugin editors always on top. And then you could also uncheck open effect editor after loading it. So give that a try, JVI. All right, so we see Benny from Sweden. Thanks for joining us. And he's just finishing in the studio. All right, so we see Pablo's just that he loves Tenerife as well. All right, so we see a question: when you unmix the cake using spectral layers, what's the quickest way to separate audio channels of all the ingredients? I think we showed that. Just go under the layers and drag and drop it to the project window. But let me know if you missed that. And that will create separate audio files. All right, so we see Gareth saying, hope to have a new Lunar Mess tune coming your way this weekend, Greg. So look forward to playing bass on it. It's going to be kind of a crazy week this week and next week, so it may take me a few days to get to it, but I will look forward to playing some bass for you. And Pablo and Michael Teams as well. So, and to see, you might be more than one. So, and you'll have a busy weekend. So I'm going to have a busy weekend as well. So. All right, so we're just seeing from Mark Rabin says follow up regarding the reset sections in Mixer. I've been doing it the way, created presets, etc. The snapshots is what I was seeking. So grateful for you in this stream. So yeah, snapshots are a great way. That's another interesting way of being able to do that as well. And thank you for the kind words. And I'm glad that you could be a part of the community. Okay. So I see about the hi-hat question and sampler track. Says he wants to know if it's possible without dragging the sample. I want to hear the pattern in media bay as my current sample on the sampler track is temporarily replaced by the sample I'm on currently. So you'd have to kind of drag it in. That's how it's going to kind of work. So you could load up other sampler tracks if you wanted to. But I think even if we kind of just drag samples in, that's probably the best method for doing that if you want to hear it like in context of the track. Okay, so we see just a question, how to become a Cubase feature artist or beta tester. So, we do have an artist relations department at Steinberg. So you can, If you wanted to send me information, I'd be happy to pass it along to the artist relations person. And we could also do the same for beta testing if you want. So usually with beta testing, one thing that I always recommend people do is to actually do what's like an actual beta report, how they would report something. So that's always a good methodology to see if someone's good for testing. So. Okay. All right. So we see more discussion on the sampler, the hi-hat in the sampler track. So it says, I find it very time-consuming when doing sample selection. You have to hear the sample as one shot instead of in context. So you could do this kind of, if you're doing this may be a better use case for Groove Agent. So let's say if I'm here, and let's jump to like a quick Groove Agent pattern here. All right, I'll revert my project. It's like the revert function. I'm the only one that uses it before going back. All right, so let's say it's great for demonstrations. All right, so let's say if I wanted to come here, and let's see if we could do it a little more elegant. I don't think it's unfair to drag the file into the sampler track and audition it. I think it's pretty sensible approach. And you could always duplicate the sampler track. But let's say if I was playing, I'm just gonna stop some of my. All right, so let's say if I switch my pattern here. All right, and I wanted to now come over and replace the hi-hat. So if I go to my instrument pad here, I could just take the hi-hat. So say this is my hi-hat, and I wanted to browse other sounds. I could say, let's get to instruments, and I could just do this with a browser as well. So I could just say, okay, let's get to, VST sound. Let's go to Groove Agent content. I wanted to come over here. Let's look at audio files. Electronic kits. Let's say if I have all of this. So say I wanted to now just replace like that hi-hat. When I'm here, I could just I think that might be a way to but even when we do this, we have unlimited, we have like 10 levels of undo within the plugin as well. So if you wanted to just and say, okay, I want to take and if I don't like it, I could just undo it. So I think that's a pretty good methodology for being able to, replace individual sounds in kits. So, maybe consider using Groove Agent instead of the sampler track, and gives you a lot more flexibility. All right, so we see, can you implement custom samples in Media Bay? So Media Bay, we could access any sounds that you want. So if we come over here to Media Bay and, we go to the file browser and you could, again, look for any audio file that's on your system. So that's completely accessible. And you could also just right click and add it as a favorite. So if we go home, we could just say, oh, I want to go to my favorites here. What can't be done by users is when we want to see all the kind of pretty icons here. So those aren't user adjustable, and this is also part of kind of deeper levels of integration. I think if you become kind of a sound, like a VST, I think you could create an alliance with the company, and there's provisions where third party companies create these. And this is how it could be moved to other libraries, to different drives, and still have the link. So there's a lot of stuff under the hood and other than just the graphic image. Let's see, we're doing well on time. Thanks for all the great questions. All right, so we see send me your info so I could send you mines for beta and artist relations. Thanks. So if you want to, you could reach out to Club Cubase at steinberg.de. So that's how you could reach me. Okay, just reading through comments here, trying to catch up. Okay, just still going through comments. All right. All right, so we see hello from France. Can you explain to me the different render in place options? Okay, so let's say if I have just I'll do it for, let's say if I have several different events here. So let's say, okay, so say I have these different events and we wanted to render in place. Now, render in place can work for either events or for tracks, and sometimes there's different settings. So if I select events here, so let me just select some of the different events, and as we want to work with this, we'll go to our edit menu and we'll select render in place and go to render settings. So we have modes. So we have, as one event, this will take all of these files and make it into one contiguous event. We also have an option as separate events. So this will last the equal length of the events as the events themselves. And we also have what's called block events, and this is kind of a hard term to convey, but what this will do, and I'll just show this will turn these files and make them last until the next event starts. So we come over here, let's render. All right, so let's say if I will just come to my render in place again. So, and we could include if we want processing. So let's say we had effects and reverbs, we had a compressor. So if we have channel settings, this would include the dynamics processing. If we have a sends, like reverbs or delays via sends, we could do the complete signal path, or we could also include the master effect. So if we had like a compressor on the stereo output, that can be rendered as well. When we come here, we have tail mode. So sometimes we may have delays or reverbs that last beyond the boundaries of the events, and we could have this set to off, or we could add a reverb tail in seconds or bars and beats. So if we have a 10-second reverb and we wanted to hear every bit of that reverb after the last note or after the part boundary is ended, we could extend the size with tails. The file naming scheme, we could give it a custom name. We could also come right over here and choose a path where these particular files will be saved to. If we select multiple events, we could mix these down to different files. And when we have options also for the source event setting, so what's going to happen to the events after they are processed. So at this point, we could keep them unchanged, but it will default to events are muted so that we don't have the MIDI playing and the audio playing, basically doubling the sound. Now, so when we have event selected, that's what we get. When we have a track selected, we get a couple of other additional options so that when we do a render in place, and we see these in the source events, and you have to make sure that you don't have an actual event selected anywhere. But when the track is selected, we could choose to disable the track, or we could disable the source tracks or remove the source track. So if I don't want the MIDI here, I could just remove the source tracks, and that would just render it as audio and get rid of the MIDI. So I know some composers will do that. They'll do everything in MIDI and they never want to see the MIDI again because it could be moved. It's easier to kind of mess up or change. And they'll just, as soon as everything is in MIDI, they'll just render it. I think Mark Roos does that. So as soon as he can transform everything into audio, you could do that. So that's some of these settings that you could get from render in place. Okay, we see Gareth can't remember his question. And now he's saying Humble Pie. Great band. All right, so I think I'm caught up with the chat. So let me jump over to some questions that were sent in advance. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. Let me just jump over to another web browser here. Okay, so we see, hi Greg, I have a question. Is there a way to open a session without loading any VSTs, plugins, or instruments? Because sometimes I need to open and close many sessions to check them visually, and most of the time the sessions have a lot of instruments to load, which takes a really long time. Okay, so how we can get by this is, let's say if I wanted to open up a session, and I'll do one that's kind of different instruments. So let's say if I come here, and we'll get this option, do you want to activate the project? Instead of hitting activate, say no. And then as we do this, the project, we could see what the project is doing. We could even just come over here and look at parts, but none of the instruments themselves are activated or loaded. So again, once we go to open a particular project, you're asked if you want to activate the project, and at that point, just simply choose no. So if I just wanted to come to a particular project, I'll come here, hit open, and then do you want to activate it, choose no, and then you could take a look at the project. You can make changes without all the different VST instruments and plugins getting loaded up. All right, so we had a question. Hi, Greg. Why is it that when I download a song from YouTube and import it into Cubase, the LUFS meters show -10 to -6 average when we know that YouTube normalizes songs to -14 LUFS? So there's a lot of variables here. So one, it could be, I'm not sure if it's, like probably my, it could be that commercial music is kind of ideally supposed to be delivered at -14 LUFS, and then it might be compressed. It could be that, when you are actually dealing with, an audio file that's been put onto a streaming platform, you might have some level changes when you actually download it and decompress the file to edit it in the DAW like Cubase. So that may accommodate some, but there's a lot of artists that just simply don't comply, especially YouTube, where it's kind of the wild west of non-standard standards. And also it could, it might be the gain structure. So it doesn't, you don't mention how you are actually determining it, if you're just looking at the meters, or if you're doing it from an audio statistics standpoint as well, if where you're getting the LUFS meter. But, it wouldn't surprise me, so I'm not sure if it's a commercial YouTube release or, but, you can hear varying levels on YouTube all the time. Okay, so we had a question about why don't MIDI parts follow the tempo changes of tempo detected audio in a project? And this is from Sven Isaacson. So I think I may have found kind of a solution for this. So let's go ahead and start off. All right, so let's say I have a 2-track file here and I want to just simply do a tempo detection on it. But let's say I had a drum loop on it, like a MIDI drum loop, some MIDI parts already existing. So I will... Okay, so let's say I'm just going to put in just like a generic drum loop here. So let's say when I just some MIDI information. So I'm going to just start this. And now when we listen to our metronome and start I'll just solo the drums and I put my metronome on. That, this will be perfectly aligned to the grid. All right, so I'll just make my click a little louder here. All right, so now when we listen to our MIDI drums, those are perfectly aligned. So now I want to take a tempo detected audio file. So right now when we listen to this audio file, we have no no tempo. So the drums are lined up with the tempo of the click, and they're correlating to that. But let's say the audio isn't. And we had kind of discussed this on a few live streams ago, maybe 3 or 4 ago. So I'm going to do a tempo detection of the audio file itself. So what was happening is we'll come over here, we'll do an analysis of the tempo, and we see that we're perfectly on the grid now. And as soon as we will come and, we see that we're now kind of off the grid. So I do an offbeat correction. Let's say we listen. So we would think that the MIDI, being that it's in musical mode, would then switch and kind of follow. But when we do this, we notice that the MIDI track actually switched to linear mode. So what I'm going to do to kind of alleviate this, to keep the drum pattern on the grid where it's starting right on the beat, is I'm going to choose to lock the track. So now when I do an analysis of the tempo, and I will come over here. Oh, I locked the wrong track, I think. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to lock the MIDI track here. So let's see if we do our analysis of the audio event. Okay, and so now when I'm just going to find kind of the downbeat of the audio. So we'll come here. All right, so now what I'm going to do is just simply unlock the particular track, and as I move this event, it'll now be on the grid. So let's take a listen to it. Just see that now it doesn't look like it's on the grid, but in my test it looks like it was. So let me just leave it locked. So I'm going to leave that locked. So now as we do this, and now the MIDI is going to automatically follow. So try, before you do the tempo detection, try selecting the MIDI track and then just locking the particular event. And then it should automatically line up on the grid for you. All right, so those are questions that were mailed in. Let me just jump back. And once again, if you learned something new, make sure you do hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that. Okay, just going through some comments. All right, so we have a question. Hello from Argentina. I was wondering, is it possible to process an input channel and listen live to the insert effects? Thanks. Yes, you could do that. The one thing, if you're trying it, and so when we go to your mix console here, we'll have input channels, and these input channels we could apply effects. So if I wanted to apply EQ or compression before the signal is recorded and basically bake that sound in of the processing. So if I wanted to embed the compression and EQ to the file, at that point it'll be recorded with those particular settings on it. Now there is a scenario where you could place those different effects but not hear them, and often that's going to be when we're dealing because as we do this, we're sending the signal through the software, and as we're monitoring, it may impose latency depending upon the plugin. But as we go to process the particular files, it's basically running it through those processors, and we could hear it. But if we have the settings set here, if we go to your studio menu to studio setup and we select your audio interface, and if it is set to direct monitoring, or if the direct monitoring is enabled when we through like a software control panel or a software mixer, what often that does is it sends the output or the input directly to the output so that we can't hear any of the effects in real time. So if you think you have everything set up, go to your audio system to your audio interface and make sure that direct monitoring isn't turned on or enabled in the DSP mixer of your audio interface. All right, so we see how do I make music beat? So it's pretty easy in Cubase. There's a number of different ways to accomplish that. But let's say if I just wanted to come here, so I'll just do a quick. So I'm just going to create kind of a blank part and double click, and we could launch our drum editor. So let's say if I just wanted to put this on a beat. So we'll go to my drum track here. So I'm just using Groove Agent. So let's say I will now just load a kit with patterns. My son is home from school. You may hear him running above me. All right. All right, so let's say at this point I want to, we can just kind of create a drum map. Then when I double click, we go into a drum editor. And this is kind of like, very often copied but never quite equaled. So let's say I just will solo this. And then I could just, say, okay, I want kick. And let's say, okay, just put in some claps. So at this point, we could just kind of come over here and just start putting in. So you could just kind of, create beats and do stuff like that very quickly in Cubase. And there's also a MIDI plugin called Beat Designer, which works great as well. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, can I save different kits sorted by instrument type in Groove Agent and then make individual patterns for each instrument? And each pattern has its own output channel, one for percussion, one for hats. So if you're starting from like a blank instance of Groove Agent, you could build your kits to do just exactly that. In the full version, the full version of Groove Agent, what comes with Groove Agent, what comes with Cubase is Groove Agent SE, but the full version of Groove Agent will have its own patterns, and they could be actually just kind of triggered directly, for individual pads if you wanted to, and you could have 128 patterns and 128 different samples. But the Groove Agent SE that comes with Cubase doesn't necessarily have the patterns inside, but you could definitely do it in the full version of Groove Agent. So. All right, so we see from Mark Rabin, so with activated project, this was Eureka. Can we copy from unactive projects to active projects? Yep. So let's say if I wanted to come here, let's go to this project here, and you could even just drag and drop. So if I say, okay, I want that audio file to be right there, we could just do it just like that, or copy and paste as well. So we see Mark Rabin just saying, today has been extra juicy for me. I'm working in Cubase and watching it at the same time, and great hints today. That's good. It's like you're cheating on either your Cubase session or you're cheating on the Hangout live stream. So, but we'll let you. Okay, so I see the articulations that I use in expression maps shows in the score. I check don't show map expression, but they are still there. Okay, so let me just give it a shot here quickly. Okay, so let's say we'll get to our bass part here, and let's say I just wanted to now enter in some articulations. All right, so let's say pits, espressivo pits, legato. So we'll just kind of enter in some random articulations here. Okay, and we'll look at this part now in the score editor. Okay, so now we're in, so we can see all of our different ones. So let's say if we go to, so we can see our expression map here. And let me just see if it's in the staff settings page. Let's say we go to project here. I haven't done this in a long time, so let's see if we can go to okay, so we say hide expression map symbols, and I hit apply. So we'll see this under miscellaneous. So now let's say if I jump, I look at this. And now, so we go to this. So we'll look at this in the score editor. Okay, so we'll close that and let's go back to our base where we had the articulations. And as we do that, the articulations aren't there. So this may be saved on a project basis, but make sure you're doing it from project to notation style. And then under miscellaneous, you'll see the hide expression map symbols. So try that. All right, so we're seeing some Socrates here references. Mark Rabin's bring up the allegory of the cave. So it was one of my favorites. All right, so we see the question about the input here, listening to the input effects, and it says I didn't look at the direct monitoring option, and it was checked. So that's great. I'm glad it figured it out for you. All right, so we see from I did get the email about the I think it was about the beta testing and artist. So I'll pass it on. Thanks for sending that. All right, so we see from Mark Rabin just saying, how did I not know this? Thank you, Greg. It may have been about copying parts from inactive projects. All right, so we see Cubase 12. When? So, you know, they've announced that it'll be kind of first quarter of 2022. So, so when it's out, I'm sure they'll let everyone know. All right, so we see Michael Pierce has to dash. So thanks for joining us, and look forward to seeing you on Friday's Zoom meetup. And thank you for the lovely soup. All right, so I think I am caught up with the questions. We'll see if there's more questions that come in. You guys are learning Cubase so well. We have fewer questions after 16,000 questions or something. So I'll give it a couple more minutes and we'll wait and see if we have another question pop in. If not, we could wrap up a little early. There's usually about 15 seconds or so by the time I say something to when it gets out to everyone. It's also great to see Graham Witcher on the live stream as well. Not sure if I mentioned it earlier. Always a loyal attendee. And Gareth, if you can't remember your question, you could always email me. So we're seeing Gareth is saying Greg deserves an early clock off for once. Yeah, I've been up late working on different work projects. Okay, so I guess we're kind of out of questions. I appreciate everyone being a part of the live stream, and I hope everyone's learned some tips and tricks, and look forward to not only Friday's live stream, but being able to see everyone on a Zoom meetup. So if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I can send you the Zoom invite. Otherwise, I'll post it in the meeting or on the live stream Friday afternoon. So everyone, please stay safe and healthy, and we'll see everyone on Friday. Thank you very much.